Awesome. So I thought I'd just walk through some of the things we're thinking about and some of the things that are going on culturally. I've had a chance to spend a bunch of time in the Valley lately, in Silicon Valley, and spend a lot of things just thinking about with clients, like what is this new agility? I think it's a great way to put it, and I think this idea of adaptation is critical for all of us. Just by way of background, I started my career in the magazine publishing business, launched a publishing company, owned a sports publishing company, and sold that to Condé Nast. Written 5 marketing books, all about co-creation and collaboration. Had a company called Radar Communications, which I merged with Crispin Porter Bogusky. Went on a nice little run. Went from, I guess, a couple hundred of us to 1,200 in 2 years, and won a bunch, 18 pitches in a row. All centered on strategy. Was all centered around co-creation, with some great creative work. And Victor and Spoils really came out of some work that Alex Bogusky and I were doing with a electric motorcycle company called Bramo. We didn't have enough creatives in-house, and we thought, oh, well, let's use this platform called CrowdSpring and crowdsource the corporate identity for Bramo, and it was crazy. The industry was pissed off, and we got a lot of good creative ideas from all over the world. And my take on it was, wow, my earnout's almost over with Crispin. Time to go do something new. So that's the genesis of Victors and Spoils. The Victors and Spoils is kind of the concept of the name. Power to the brand and power to the people. I got up this morning and I read this really great article. It's in the International New York Times this morning, and it's the paradox of art as work. And I thought it was so interesting because it was really trying to defend the idea of professional artists against the idea of these heathen amateurs. How dare these amateurs use technology to disrupt, orchestra players and opera musicians and people that have worked really hard to do it, where people can just put up their music on YouTube and get a bunch of fans and get a bunch of followers. It's really interesting to me because I think throughout history, technology dictates that we change, whether it's the Gutenberg press or any of the other technologies that happen. Last week I was down in Nicaragua surfing, and one of the things that blew me away.
Amazing. Is that you?
No, I was on. I actually might. No, I wish it was me. I've got some photos. But the amazing thing is that what blew me away, surfing a lot, is that it was the first time I really noticed that 35%, or about a third of the folks in the break catching waves, had a GoPro camera. Now, some of them had a GoPro camera filming themselves, doing video selfies, but a ton of them were carrying GoPro cameras, filming other people. So all of a sudden, you've got a situation where, in the water, you could hire a videographer for $200 a day with $5,000 of equipment, or you could buy a $300 camera and go out with your buddies and do it yourself. And so there's this kind of dynamic of when technology gets so cheap, right? The $5,000 underwater 5D Mark III with the Aqua Tech, perfect, housing to the GoPro. What happens to the marketplace? And this democratization of creativity is affecting everybody, every brand, every agency. So it really begs the question: who's an amateur and who's a pro? I'm a rock climber and spend a lot of time around the world climbing. And a lot of my friends have become professional photographers and professional filmmakers, but really they're just dirtbag climbers that had a camera and they were in the right place at the right time, and something big happened. Somebody climbed a first ascent, somebody jumped off some cliff. They were just the guy there that had the camera and took the image, and now it's on the cover of Nat Geo. So my question always is, who gets to decide anyway, right? It always seems to me that the people that, are the industries that have the establishment, the status quo, really are the people that try to dictate who's professional and who's not. So it's really way beyond agencies and way beyond advertising. It's kind of welcome to this collaborative economy, and I think there's some really interesting things going on. If you think about it from a usage standpoint, a product standpoint, the lowly drill in the United States, the average drill is used for 13 minutes in its lifetime. So if that's the case, there's all this surplus, right? There's all this surplus locked up. If you spend $100 on a drill, that's a very expensive drill. It's a $400 drill, right, per hour to use that thing. So if you think about it, why not share that? Why not have some kind of mechanism, digital mechanism, to create a trust system to share that? The average car sits still for 95% of the time. So how do we capture that kind of usage? And there are lots of new systems. Relay Rides is a new platform in the Valley that's trying to capture that surplus in the marketplace, right? It's like, could you could you lease your car out when you're not using it? Can that happen? This number was astounding to me. The average Airbnb user in New York City earns an extra $21,000 a year. So I think what's really going on here is we think about business as about using our assets, right? How do we utilize our assets, whether it's our people or our tools, in a powerful way? But in our personal lives, we don't think about that. We buy a new car because we like the way it rides. Well, we might use it only on weekends. We might use it, a few hours a week. But what happens if that changes? What happens if we can make money off the things we own and we utilize those things? Who's used Uber lately? Anybody use Uber? I've been blown away. I was in Boston last week, and I was talking to a guy, and he said, well, I used to drive a cab, and I make $1,400 a week driving a cab, and it cost me $1,100 to rent that cab from the cab company. Now I make $1,400 a week. Uber helped me lease a car for $200 a week, and I pay them 20% of the $1,400, so that's another $300. I'm now paying $500 to make $1,400. And my point was, wow, you're making a lot more money than you used to. And his point was, no, I'm making money now. Before I was losing money driving a cab. So that's what's happening, right? There are new systems that all of a sudden are really fluid that disintermediate the current systems throughout our society. And I don't think that advertising there's no reason that it should be immune to these changes. So we have to adapt, and I think that's a really important part of the conversation. I'm glad you guys are having it. Really interesting chart. Just see, these are some of the folks that are focused on the collaborative economy. And some of the folks that aren't even on there, if you think about some of the biggest platforms today, Facebook and Twitter and some of the social media, aren't those really just crowdsourced platforms? I mean, it's amazing to me, right? It's a piece of software. They don't create anything. We create all the content for them, and then they get to make money on it. So it's a pretty amazing system. I can share these slides with you guys later if you want to. Eric von Hippel's a good buddy and one of the thinking leaders on user-generated user innovation. He's been at MIT for a long time, and he believes that companies built on static, immovable, uneditable systems will find themselves in the dustbin of history. One of the really wonderful things that have happened in the last year and a half is Harvard's done a couple case studies on it. So I spent a bunch of time at the Harvard Business School. I was there last week giving the keynote to their digital conference with Beth Comstock from GE. And I'm really surprised how varied it is. Beth's making huge investments. She just put $79 million into Quirky, this kind of social creative. Have you guys seen that, Quirky? It's a social invention system that allows for people to create new things, new consumer products. It's also put a big investment into, what's the name of the ride? The crowdsourced car company. I'll have to think about it per se. I can't remember the name. But anyway, GE is really passionate about this and putting big investments in it, trying to get to the future first. I grew up in the newspaper business, fourth generation newspaper guy. And when I graduated college, I decided not to go into the newspaper business. So I bought a magazine called Rocky Mountain Running News, which was essentially the results of running races in the local community in Colorado. The magazine made $100,000, and it cost about $70,000 or about $60,000 to print the monthly issues, about $35,000 to typeset, and I made $5,000 a year. And this crazy thing came along called the Mac Plus. It was 1986, and the Mac Plus and a laser writer, and I decided to spend a whopping $23,000 on those two things. And the typesetters that I used to pay $35,000 to, used to say, oh, this desktop publishing thing, it'll never work. You'll be back paying twice as much as you used to. You need to really make sure that those fonts are really well kerned and they're perfect, and you're really going to be doing it. And my point to them was, I'd love to, but I've got a wife and I'd love to have a family and I need to make a salary. So I would sit there and typeset on my Mac, and that's the way that we started doing it. 20 years later, I don't know a lot of typesetters anymore. So certainly industries get blown up. I think this is a really important thing to think about. This is from Mary Meeker's work at Kleiner Perkins. But certainly in the newspaper business, the amount of advertising is really back to the 1950s level. If you think about in 244 years, the Encyclopedia Britannica went out of print in 2012. And my 12-year-old son likes to remind me that, because his teachers have told him that Wikipedia is not a good source for information. But, it doesn't, our judgment of what's good and what's bad has changed. So the same rules apply for the advertising industry. Creativity now comes from everywhere. The only real question is how do you deliver it? I mean, I feel like an agency's job is to apply creativity to solve business problems, right? That's what our role is. And there are a lot of people that do a really good job of that. It's just one perspective on that. Bill Joy, who's been a software founder, a few companies. No matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else, and we really believe that at Victors and Spoils. That half of our crowd, we have 10,000 people that work with us. Half the people work at other agencies or at clients, and they just want to express their creativity. And that doesn't include all the brand fans and brand customers that work with us as well. So we really believe that effective, admired, surprising ideas comes from this kind of this community, right? This collaboration between fans, wild cards, people that are really interested in culture. It could be artists, other folks. Certainly the brand and people inside the brand have a big voice in what we do. And then experts, folks that we work with. We've grown a lot. We grew 75% last year. We'll grow probably 250% this year. We've gone from 7 to 45 folks in-house, and I would say that probably we employ 250 other folks that at least most of their income comes from us on a regular basis. We're working globally. So some of our clients that we've worked with and are working with currently, we're doing new brand work for Patagonia, did some stuff for Coke recently, just did some graphic design for Vitamin Water, Harley Davidson stuff we're well known for. Smirnoff, we just did some TV. So we're doing both traditional and digital. A lot of fun stuff. And there are some things we're thinking about. There's 3 things. One is we think of ourselves in an experiment. The minute we decide to say we've got something to conserve, whether it's our point of view as being an innovator or our point of view of crowdsourcing or collaboration, the minute I pull out one of my books I've written and said, this is the dogma, is the minute we're done. So we've got to constantly think about experimentation. We won the JCPenney account. We're the brand innovation agency of record with Evolution Bureau. We share that account. We work together on it 50-50. It was something that we didn't even pitch for, but we kind of went to Deb Berman and said, look, we're here to help, however we can help. That's worked out pretty well. You talked about the Oreo thing. This is what happened this year on the Super Bowl.
How did JCPenney take over the 2014 Super Bowl to promote the Go USA Mittens program without using a $4 million commercial on the big screen? By creating a frenzy on the little screen. Now, using social media to create buzz during the big game isn't a new concept, but we didn't want to sit around and hope for a lights out moment to tweet about. Instead, we turned out the lights. Here's how it worked. During the big game, JCPenney sent out a few tweets full of jarbled text to get people talking. The reaction was immediate. Like 50 retweets per second immediate. Like, oh crap, this is actually working immediate. And it didn't take long for the other brands to jump on. Within a half hour, nearly every major US media outlet had written about JCPenney's curious tweets. And then we revealed the culprit, the mittens. After the dust settled, a study was released that showed JCPenney was the second most talked about brand on Twitter during the Super Bowl, and the 5th most mentioned user altogether, just shy of Bruno Mars and the NFL. The effort resulted in over 50,000 retweets, 8,500 new Twitter followers, hundreds of global media stories, over 300 million positive media impressions, some enthusiasm from Good Morning America, and one really cute baby pic. But what about the mittens? Oh yeah, sales of those babies increased by 105%. With no media or production dollars, JCPenney was able to break through and become the topic of conversation on the toughest media day of the year.
So I think there are a couple of really interesting things for us. One is Budweiser spent $35 million, JCPenney spent $0. That was 3 tweets. And we don't believe in these big selling clients on the idea that they need big social media war rooms. I think a lot of agencies do that. And that was really 2 creatives and 1 client, 2 creatives sitting in a living room at their house, and 1 client that did it on laptops. Certainly, the other thing that I thought was really interesting in this process is that all these guys with their big social media war rooms were actually reacting to us. And that's really great, but for me, it's about still the big creative idea. What was the idea? That tweet with mittens came out of an idea that we had. We did a web video called Go Liggity, Ted Liggity's a skier. The week before, that ad, we called it the ad of the week, even though it was a web film for the Olympics and not for the Super Bowl. So it was a creative idea that actually powered that Twitter campaign that we only needed 3 tweets to interact. But I thought it was really interesting to see the effectiveness. And it's twice as many media impressions that the Oreos project got the year before. So lots of success by focusing on a creative idea and then using cheap social media to power it. We don't have all the answers. I'm not going to show this video, but I can show it to you guys later, but I think we're short on time.
Yeah.
And then just the last thing I want to show, because I think one of the things we're really trying to focus on, because we're a flexible system, we can say why not instead of why. And I think why is really reductive. I think it's really great in some situations, but why not is really important. What are the possibilities? Why don't we try to innovate? Why don't we try to figure out how to disrupt ourselves? This happened, and I think it's a really good case on how do you need to go from brand out to consumer in, but also disrupt yourself.
The New York Times and Bolthouse Farms asked us to create a fictional campaign to rebrand broccoli. The campaign would set out to answer a long overdue question. If advertising can get us to eat something as terrifying as this, could it work to get America to eat its vegetables?
Vile weed!
Well, we were about to find out. The campaign would start by picking a fight with the ever-popular kale, positioning kale as a fleeting fad and officially ending broccoli's side dish treatment forever. Both the client and the New York Times ate it up. It actually made the cover of the magazine's November 1st issue. And within days, the broccoli love was flowing. Even some of the most influential pop culture icons started showing their support for broccoli. But the buzz wasn't all talk. In November, broccoli sales jumped a whopping 23% compared to that same month the previous year. And in just a few months, the campaign garnered more than 350 million earned PR impressions, the equivalent of $5 million in PR exposure for broccoli. But that was just the start. 3 students at Yale University were so inspired by the campaign, they decided that merely reading about it wasn't enough. They made it their mission to make sure the campaign ran. Using Kickstarter, they got consumers to fund all media and printing costs to actually run the campaign in New Haven, Connecticut, one of the country's food deserts. And in the end, their effort not only garnered large amounts of local press for the campaign, including a feature on NPR, it led to some serious results. Just 2 weeks after the campaign launched in New Haven, one store saw broccoli sales increase 111%. The numbers were undeniable, and so was the passion. In the age of viral videos, the broccoli makeover became a viral campaign. And it's not done spreading. As we speak, consumers are making the campaign happen in all kinds of places, like Ithaca, LA, DC, even Amsterdam. And all thanks to inspired people who saw a fictional campaign and demanded it become nothing short of real.
Can we stop with the kale propaganda?
What I thought was really interesting is when we decided to do this, we talked to a bunch of the media industry in the ad business, and they all said, no, we'll never cover it because it's fake advertising. But what is advertising? If advertising, just like journalism, is to change culture, that campaign was pretty successful. In the end, it became real because the guys at Yale actually spent the money to buy the media and took our assets and put it out there. So my sense is that's the new world we're playing in. Is if it's about changing culture, there's lots of ways to do it, and that's what got us excited to do that. And since then, we've won a couple of food accounts. We just won the Driscoll Berries account, which is the world's largest supplier of strawberries and blueberries. So our philosophy is we all win. The creatives should win, the clients should win, and culture should win. And how do we do that? How do we set that up? If it means disintermediating ourselves, if it means being smaller instead of focusing on fixed cost businesses and becoming a much more variable cost business, we're going to do that. We're going to continue to try to be an experiment to play with these new ways of doing things. So, and I think the big thing we have to remember is that, it's just advertising. Nobody's going to die. So the way to be more innovative is to have a little more space, right? And to not get so worried about all the things that we tend to think about and get worried about in the industry. So that's just my only thing to kind of end on. So thanks. Any questions?